Sahana bhavatu, sahanao punaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be full of illumination. May we not unnecessarily disagree with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is our Spiritual Seekers question and answer sessions. Most people, whether they know it or not, are seeking spirituality mainly under the guise of other things. But the people who come on to these programs, the people who listen to these talks and so on, and who go into this question and answer session, they are already on a path toward an envisaged freedom, or at least want to find out what is the underlying truth behind all the ephemeral things in front. So I'll wait for a few moments, and you have a chance to ask some questions.
So could I say something, but it's not a question, but we were up in the library in Dungannon today, and one of the librarians said to us, how are your friends from Dublin? This Swami, and I thought that was so nice. It was quite poignant.
He's from Eastern Europe. Yeah.
He's from Eastern Europe, and he said he missed you the last time you were there visiting, and he just wanted to pass on his best wishes. I thought that's important to let you know.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Well, I can comment on that a little bit. You see, there's a universally recognized sense of what is true and what is valid. We have an inbuilt automatic sensor that is able to give us a level of intuition. We know instinctively what is right, what is true. Sometimes when we doubt this, we speculate in a wrong way. So the first instinct that we have is really normally a valid one. Not always, but normally. And people are interested in some universal truth because most people have problems. In fact, most of life is beset with problems. Largely, we ignore that side of it. If we attend to it, people say we're negative or we are pessimistic. But actually, if you look at your own lives, you'll see that sometimes all of life's endeavors are more to do with identifying and getting around obstacles or finding a way to avoid them. And it is only really when we have an absence of things that we declare ourselves to be unhappy. We have an absence of good health, and we say we're not that happy. We have COVID, for example, and all the symptoms there are displayed, and we're not as cheerful as we used to be. It affects our moods. If we run into financial disasters, then of course, we're no longer satisfied or content. If we run into family disagreements, domestic difficulties, social upheavals, and then if we look at the global stage and we see, oh, some wars are going on or some suffering is going on, see, life becomes overwhelmingly pessimistic. So most of us will have to find a way around this. How do we become optimistic in the midst of various things, various crises? Most people at the moment are concerned with two things: the COVID virus, recovery of economy that goes with it, and of course, centered attention around Russia, Ukraine, and so on. While I've been here in France, some questions have arisen in connection with that. What do we do amidst crisis? What can we do to change things? Well, there's nothing we can do directly to change things. Indirectly, we can do it. If we take an attitude that life is not a struggle, that's most people's position. If we are able to see something in a different way, then what would be the result? And so today in a talk I gave, I highlighted, actually somebody highlighted for me, that there was a French copy, which is The Game of Life and How to Play It. It's a fundamental book that I recommend everybody to read. Small book. You see, after the last century, or the beginning of the last century, when 2 world wars occurred, just decimating millions and millions and millions of lives unnecessarily, then thinking people said, why don't we try to avoid this in the future? How will we do it? Turning to Eastern philosophy, they found a few answers. They found a different way of looking at things, and then saw that they could adapt it into Western, Christian, or Abrahamic language that people more easily understand. Biblical language, even. There's an author like that called Florence Scovel Schinn, who writes this book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. It's suggestive of 2 things. Firstly, that there's a principle that says we can't explain this world with its craziness, its seeming idiocy. Well, of course, understanding that there are no bad people, only bad behaviors. Still, what drives somebody to a kind of global madness that causes global suffering? Wishing to avoid such a thing in the future and studying Oriental principles. There can only be one explanation for how we get from being to becoming, how we get from the absolute to the relative. Why is this as it is? Well, quite frankly, we don't know. But the answer comes in the form of the Oriental concept called Leela. It's a play, it's a game, it's a sport. And if it's a sport, then we need to take a sporting attitude. But is suffering a game? No, you can't easily see that necessarily. So we have to deal with this game in an insular local way. If we can set our mind right and steady, then we are able to deal with the larger issues. But most people haven't managed to control their own self, their own body, their own mind. And of course, it's the mind that is the most disturbing thing. In this game, as it's put, what we consider to be the universe and life is a fragmented version of what is absolutely there. Now, if we take fragments, of course, fragments tend to reflect what is there in many, many different versions of it. They're like pots of water, one sun gets reflected in many pots. Same thing with any fragments. But what is the fragmenter? Fragmenter is the mind. And so therefore, to control the thing which is fragmenting, dividing everything, is necessary. The whole of spiritual life is necessary. So Florence Scovel Schinn begins her book in a very profound way. She says, most people consider life a battle, where I put myself in a certain position, and put other things in the environment against me. And whether they're friendly or not, I'm suspicious. I have to consider either these things are my enemy or my potential enemy. And in our self-preservation, we are so fragile. A simple comment, a simple adverse criticism is enough to drive us into deep depression and maybe even suicide. An insular movement that says everyone is against me, poor me, I'm a victim, nobody likes me. And you see all of this as an internal dialogue. We become persuasive by our internal dialogues. We have to change our dialogues. If we are to make any conquest of pessimism, then we have to change our way of making an inner commentary about things. Our internal news station has to change. So most people consider that life is a battle, something like an uphill struggle, where injustice pervades, where any news that we find on the radio or the TV is intrinsically bad news. We expect it. And yet there's a kind of keenness. Let me switch on a radio or a television in order to discover what is the latest bad news. Of course, I don't classify it as bad. I just classify it as news. But it's always bad news. Then what to do? I become concerned. In some cases, paranoid. What will happen? What will happen? Will there be a new world war? Will we go back to the early parts of the madness of the 20th century? Or will we remain cool-headed? And today, of course, the most devastating weapons are in the hands of many, many countries. For example, it only takes about 10 minutes. I'm adding bad news, of course, to you. It only takes about 10 minutes for a nuclear warhead to reach from Russia to the United States of America. And of course, naturally, vice versa. Supposing there's a computer glitch, then effectively it's much more because people want to anticipate or precipitate something. But is it true that life is a battle? Is it true that things are in my way, deliberately put in my way? Is there some kind of malicious divine entity sitting in the headquarters and the chief executive offices of heaven saying, let me try to make life as awkward as possible for these humans, this humanity? So the book says, but it is not a battle. It declares it. There's a different way of looking at it. Why should we think it's a battle? It is a game. This is emphatically told. So two things come into this. A statement of a principle, the game of life. Life is a game. That has no value unless we know what is the method of playing it. If it's a game, we should play it very well. It's a game, however, she goes on to say, which cannot be played successfully without the knowledge of spiritual law. Now we know that there are material laws. There's a law of gravity. We know that there are so many constants. And the curious thing about modern science is that some time ago, thinking that religious people cannot agree on the nature of God and make a 30 years war about it and sign a treaty in Utrecht, a neutrality between Catholics and Protestants, ending bloodshed, thinking people said, please work it out amongst yourselves. In the meantime, we want to investigate nature. We want to find out what this world is all about. Let's investigate that while you decide on whether God is a Protestant or a Catholic, whether Jesus was a Lutheran or not. Now, Florence Scovel Schinn puts things in a Christian language. She says, Christ taught that it was a great game of giving and receiving. What kind of game is it? It's a game of giving and receiving. It's a game of sowing and reaping. And quotation is there, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And this means that whatever a man sends out in a word or a deed will return to him. Now all deeds are predicated on a word. It's not necessarily a word that we speak. The subtle variety of the spoken world is a thought, and we thought and think in terms of words. Words and concepts have to go together. We are constantly in a dialogue with ourselves. We're constantly listening to our own inner conversations. And so these are like thoughts which are being sent out. Of course, this is a usual way of thinking of things. That if we curse somebody, it's like a thunderbolt that goes out from the head. Or if we bless somebody, it's like a dove that goes out. But of course, it's only convenience language. But there is a kind of sending. It's more actually like a suction, because the sowing is a kind of sending, and the reaping is a kind of suction and experience of whatever we ourselves put into the ground. So whatever we send out, in word or deed, will return to the thinker, will return to him. What he gives, he will receive. Nothing more, nothing less. So we are told also that the imaging faculty plays a leading part in this game of life, because we're already imagining things. And in this imagining, we're sending out words and concepts and deeds, and we're sending out a means to create and mold, construct, shape all the world in front of us, our own external environment. There's a principle like that. So we are taught also that the imaging faculty, that is, the imagining, the visualizing of a scene. Now we can easily visualize a set of circumstances when we're given bad news, under the guise of what if, or the word but, which acts as an excuse, or if. But it's pure speculation. The future hasn't come yet, because this principle says the future is being shaped by us. And the past we have to leave alone. The past is gone. You can't bring it back. I know you want to, many people, solve their problems by employing a psychiatrist or psychologist. Please put me on the couch. Let me tell you how bad my childhood was. At the age of 4, my mother was an alcoholic, and my father wasn't present for very long. My brother bullied me. But how old are you? 50? 50? And you're worried about 4 years, when you were 4 years old, playing the same record repeatedly, saying, poor me, what a pity, what a pity. Why not say, what a glory, what a glory? Why not dismiss the past instead of playing the old record? If you play a tune long enough, it'll go round and round in your head. And what became a pleasant thing becomes an irritating thing. You don't want to repeat it constantly. Play a new record. A new second is being presented. Put something new in it. And then the next second. Learn the art of doing that as a game. As a game of sowing and reaping. Put something in that is valuable. So that's the principle of it. And it's based on spiritual law. Spiritual law, game of sowing and reaping. Keep thy heart or imagination with all diligence, Florence Scovel Schinn is quoting, for out of it are the issues of life. She's taking it from the book of Proverbs. This means that what man images, that is, forms a clear picture of, sooner or later externalizes in his affairs. Such a profound, simple statement is made. And yet we ignore it, this game of sowing and reaping, because largely we don't know it's a game. We think it's a battle. We think it's a struggle. Then she goes on to give an example. She says, I know of a man who feared a certain disease, rare, difficult to get, but he pictured it continually and read about it till it manifested in his body. And he died, the victim of distorted imagination. To play successfully the game of life, we must train the imaging faculty. Now, here, over the last few days, I've been involved jointly with a facilitator on what we call Yoga Nidra. What is Yoga Nidra? Well, Yoga Nidra is a classical yoga technique that says that after some physical exercise or something like that, or even without it, we can be aware of all the various parts of the body. And what effect will this have? It'll have the effect of steadying the body. In Patanjali Yoga Sutras, with 8 steps for meditation, there is one step that is called asana, posture. Yes, we can take it as a suitable posture for sitting, so that we are alert during the highly active process of meditation, which involves visualization. We can't avoid it, imagining. But you see, it's a little bit more detailed than that, because we can completely steady the mind as an exercise by concentrating on various parts of the body and putting all our attention there. Now we have this thing called attention. It's a very, very important faculty of the mind. It's a kind of probe that is able and willing to investigate things in the external world, in the internal world. And it is easy to distract a kitten's attention. You just take a laser beam and play it on the floor. The cat thinks it's a moving object, and for hours together, the kitten will play with it, pounce on it, run after it, chase it, try to catch it, whirl around, and it may also discover its tail, which is a new object of fascination. You see how easy it is for our attention to be distracted. So most people go through life in a distracted way, not using this faculty of attention in a proper way. And without it being controlled, something happens that controls it, something external. For example, supposing we go to a concert that lasts 4 hours, we enjoy the music, our whole attention is captivated. We didn't have to consciously, deliberately train the mind to be absorbed in the music. It was pleasant. So we have to find something in life which has a pleasantness to it, that is joyful, that is blissful. And our own nature is something like a blissful base. So that what we can do is withdraw our attention if we want, and stand in a poised position and do it systematically. Now, supposing you are aware of the hand, and then supposing you are aware of the knee. By going through all of these items in the body, knowing that the body is an aggregate of parts, with the inference that it would also disintegrate at some point, there is an entity that is not part of the aggregate body. Supposing we're able, as we're doing this exercise, purely an exercise in concentration, an exercise that dismisses disturbances in the body, and comes to a situation of poise, where we are aware of a certain center of creativity. In our normal waking life, we are planning, we are scheming, we are devising, we are issuing resolves, thoughts, intentions. But after a while, that waking ego slips away, and the life faculty expresses itself in a different form, such as dream. But when the life energy goes, when it is recentered, and when we have a conscious awareness still in place, there comes a moment of poise where dream and waking merge and stand in a position of equilibrium called sleep. Sleep, we can't do anything about it. We can't control it. Dream, we can't control it. Waking state, we can control our attention. But in the position of a dream, we have this great advantage. Perhaps it's the highest area of our creative potential, a kind of launching pad from which we can launch all our thoughts and schemes and intentions that will materialize in the world. A kind of pause before we enter into a fully creative stage. potential creativity, without being unconscious. This is a state of yoga nidra, so that we can stand and be aware of a state of poise and then start painting our life picture. So such a state can be cultivated. But supposing we add another dimension to this. Supposing we say, this body is not just an aggregate. This body is not just material that disappears in death. Now today is Ash Wednesday. Last night was Shivaratri. The events are very similar. Shivaratri is a peculiar festival. Fasting takes place. It is the beginning of a certain tapasya, that is, strengthening of will through discipline. And we know that Shiva is associated with tamas, inertia, and death. It is Shiva that loves to sit in a graveyard. He is the Lord of all yogis. And his friends are all the discards of humanity. All the ugly people, the hunchbacks, all those who are ghosts and ghouls, all those that nobody else wants. You see, all the other forms of God have jewelry and sit on golden thrones with great crowns on their heads. But Shiva doesn't have such a thing. Shiva is the hippie of the Hindu Trinity. And he's quite content to sit in a simple skin. Leopard skin, or I should say tiger skin and elephant skins are there, showing a command over power, and a command over desire, and command over anger. And he makes friends with all the threatening things that we run away from, snakes. He has them round his neck as a necklace. He has it as a sacred thread. And he holds in his hand a trident. And his whole body is smeared with the ashes of the cremation ground, reminding us of our mortality, physical mortality, reminding us that we have to look for immortality, reminding us that it is accessible, because within that Shiva, within that tamas will also be, sattva and rajas will also be there, and Shiva's body is completely white. We think that the symbol of sattva is white. How is it that Shiva represents tamas? It is because Shiva is a composite. Within is also the preserving faculty, the creative faculty. And the creative side of Shiva is shown when he enters into a cosmic dance, making a small movement first, and then a full-blown dance. We can say the dance of destruction because all creation is bound toward destruction. But this also destroys our ignorance when we enter into a series of self-control, discipline, a way of taking our energy and directing it in a specified, organized way, so that a rhythm is set up that has the effect of neutralizing all the deleterious elements and revealing to us the glory of our own divine self within. Now, Ash Wednesday, how similar is this? Beginning of Lent. Christians also smear the forehead with ashes. I often find it quite amusing that there are people from, say, non-Irish cultures who come into Ireland, and they might put marks on their forehead and so on and so forth. Imagine now if a Christian walks around with a cross of ashes and goes to a foreign country which is not Christian, even in one which is Christian, people will balk at the idea. So we have to be highly sensitive to other people's cultures, no doubt, to see that we can get along with them much easier. But nevertheless, the idea of ashes is there. Remember, man, that thou art dust, and unto dust thou shalt return. The body will return to dust. That's all it is. Just so many ounces of ash. The mother's words, Divine Mother, Holy Mother Sharada Devi. So it's good to remember this. And those people, whether it's in the Hindu culture or the Christian culture, who put ash on their forehead, it reminds them and others of the mortality of the body. But is there another way of looking at it? Instead of looking at it as an aggregate that is formed, because it's an aggregate of parts, no doubt it will disintegrate also. The life force will leave it, more accurately, the Atman leaves it. Or is there another way of thinking of it to say, actually, this body is a section of divine fragments. This is a portion of the divine. This is an expression of the divine. Every single part of the body is charged with this reflected divinity, just like fragments that the mind makes is simply the same thing as the original entity. So if you add Vedanta as a philosophy or to this whole yogic practice, we are now able to heighten things, not just to be aware of the physical body, create a sense of concentration and relaxation to the point of awareness and a potential area of creativity, but also on the journey to realize that this body is also a divine chariot. This body is simply an expression or manifestation of that absolute divine, of that great light that seemingly gets fragmented into rainbow colors and dances in this world. And this is the image of Nataraja, the dancing Shiva. It is significant that a bronze statue of the dancing Shiva sits outside the CERN laboratory in Switzerland, where they operate a large Hadron Collider, a massive laboratory spanning many kilometers, and then shooting through magnets, propelling subatomic particles almost to the speed of light. And at a crucial entity, a crucial time period, making sure that they circulate one way, another avenue circulates another way, and they're designed to go into a big car crash of protons, hadrons actually, subatomic particles. And then let's see what falls out of it. Whatever falls out of it must also be parts. Maybe we can discover some more parts for our model of particle physics. Knowing that is not fully complete, let's see what happens. Let's try to create the beginnings of a theoretical Big Bang. And so this activity at the most fundamental level of nature and life is seen to be represented as a dancing figure surrounded by flames of fire, a kind of drum rhythm that operates where atoms and subatomic particles dance and configure. It's a great admission that some conscious entity that acts like a dancer is responsible for originating and sustaining what we call this world of play. And every atom is a dancer in the play. If we think that this world is a play, then that divine entity becomes a player. If we think that this is a kind of cosmic dance, then that supreme principle becomes a cosmic dancer. So if we are able to imagine now that every single part of this aggregate is charged with that same divinity, what will happen? It is not just a concentration. It is not getting just into a state of poise, but it is charging the body and the mind with divinity, with divine light. It allows a radiation of every single subatomic section. That kind of imagining faculty says this principle will create for us all good things. So Florence Scovel Schinn goes on to say, we must train the imaging faculty. A person with an imaging faculty trained to imagine only good things. We can elaborate and say only beautiful things, only glorious things, only shining things, only divine things. Brings into his life every righteous desire of his heart. Everybody wants something or other. Instead of attacking it directly, ordering it directly, we can do it by reforming the way we are thinking, since that is our currency to bring everything that we want. Health, wealth, love, friends, perfect self-expression, his highest ideals. Wonderful, wonderful principle. We have to remind ourselves of that principle all the time. Now, supposing we are charged with this positivity, supposing we become something like a flow of irresistible electricity, something that sucks in only the best, making thought a suction toward us, then we will also be a beaming entity, beaming radiance of good and peace everywhere. What should we do about any perceived calamity in this world? Well, beam goodness. See what happens. And don't be persuaded that we should focus on one problematic area in the world, because the reality is this world is in chaos in many different parts. Why should it be any different as long as man has a selfish bone in his body? It will be like that. So we also have to understand, if this is a game, what will be our part? Will we also be players? So, remarkably, this game of life goes on to say there is a place that you are to fill, that no one else can fill. Something that you are to do, which no one else can do. There's a perfect picture of it in the superconscious mind. Now, the fact that she uses the term superconscious mind means she has studied the subject of yoga. Swami Vivekananda's commentary called Raja Yoga of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras will use this phrase, conscious mind, unconscious or subconscious mind, and superconscious mind. She must have read that. The superconscious mind is an area where things open up. What is all our spiritual endeavor? What is its purpose? Is to get what we call darshana. What is darshana? Darshana means seeing, something that is seen, something that within us creates new vistas that open up more and more and more and more in more general ways, in more subtle ways, and more truthful ways. Like a flower opening. No point in a flower saying, I'm sorry, I require payment if you want to see my full bloom, if you want to smell my fragrance. In the meantime, until I get your fee, I'll remain closed up. Selfishness is a closing movement. Generosity is an opening movement. We'll be generous enough to open up these areas, but we can only do it by discovery. By knowing this spiritual principle, acting on it, and allowing an opening from within. We use the phrase darshana in worship. When we go into a shrine or a church or a temple, we are there to make a visit. Now, the Hindu temples are different from churches, because the Hindu temples are there to replicate something like a royal palace, where the king of the universe sits or the queen of the universe sits. And royal worship is done. Whatever honor we give to an earthly king, we can give to the universal king of the whole cosmos. And treat it like a real royal person. In other churches, Protestant churches, for example, It is more like a place where biblical readings can be told, preaching can be told, something like that. Bringing God out on a Sunday and saying, thank you. You had your ration. Please go back in the cupboard because Sunday football is on. The superconscious mind, therefore, is an area where darshan occurs. It's a new avenue opening. In the language of the yogis, it is the opening of a channel called Sushumna, a subtle opening in the mind where we uncover layer after layer after layer of the mind. Another way of saying that we uncover more and more truthful things about life itself, about ourselves, about nature, about the whole of existence. And when we uncoil this full potential, we uncoil our knowledge. Knowledge means our inner wisdom, more and more and more and more, until it culminates in the full blaze of glory, the full revelation, what we call ultimately samadhi. Many people are in a hurry for it. They want to avoid all the steps, all the rungs on the ladder, and go straight there to samadhi. Please teach me samadhi. Can't do it. Samadhi is an effect. It's not something you can cultivate. You can only train the mind. And once the mind is in full bloom, this is called samadhi. But every step of this opening journey is called a superconscious mind, where a little bit of energy has gone in, sometimes accidentally. We can do it in a systematic, scientific, deliberately cultivated way. That is called yoga. So we have a picture of it, a perfect picture of it in the subconscious, superconscious mind. It usually flashes across the conscious mind as an unattainable goal. And if we take it seriously as unattainable, it won't happen. I could do it, but you put the but in. Or if only. These are the phrases which prevent us. Or deservability issues. I don't deserve anything more than what I have. Something too good to be true. In reality, it is man's true destiny or destination. There is for each person or each man a perfect self-expression, something which he is to do, no one else can do. It is his destiny. This achievement is held, a perfect idea, in divine mind. See how she has studied this question of nous or logos, or what we call cosmic mind. Awaiting man's recognition. In other words, if life is a game, which it is, then we should play the game according to our individual part. And a game is a game to be enjoyed. It's not a struggle. It's not a battle. It should be very, very pleasurable activity, engaged in with full level of enthusiasm. As the imaging faculty is the creative faculty, it is necessary for man to see the idea, that is, to visualize it in glorious technicolor, before he can manifest it. The visualization happens before the manifestation. It triggers the manifestation. And therefore, it's a fait accompli, because we have to remember that there is only one mind. We think we have an individual broadcasting station. No, there's a universal broadcasting station, and we have an individual tuning mechanism. We tune into the grace of the RTE or BBC or whatever it is. That's always there. We simply have to do some tuning. When we lose our tuning or stop the practice of tuning, we get into trouble. The process of tuning is technically called abhyasa yoga. Constant practice, constant remembrance versus forgetfulness. We forget our own true nature, constantly reminding of our true nature, which is already full and free. When we forget this, we go into a victim mode. We go into an isolation ward. We say the world is against me. The world is a struggle. Life is bad. Why did we enter into such a life? I wish I was never born. And you can see what a persuasive argument this becomes if it's repeated. But it's not true. Why not say, what a glory? Why not say, I'm a child of the divine? Why not say, nothing can touch me? I'm under the full protection of the ruler and Lord of the entire universe. Nothing can affect me adversely. I am strong and true and wise. My nature is infallibility. I am immortal. I'm unchanging. Water cannot wet me and fire cannot burn me. Wind cannot dry me. Nothing can destroy me. I am that. And once we assert that, what becomes of the trivial things? If every person were to assert this in a genuine way, out of a sense of self-discovery, the world would change dramatically. So man's highest demand is for the divine design of his life. His demand should be, Infinite Spirit, open the way for the divine design of my life to manifest. Let the genius in me now be released. Let me see clearly the perfect plan, the beautifully written statements. Perfect self-expression will never be a labor, but of such absorbing interest that it will seem almost like a play. The student also knows this, that as a man comes into the world's financed by God, in the language, financed by God, the supply needed for his perfect self-expression will be at hand. God seated within knows how to steer you to the respective places worthy of his children. This is a beautiful book, The Game of Life, how to play it. And last time I was in France, I referred to this book. And so today somebody showed me a copy in French. And I think it's called Le Joie de la Vie, something like that. The Game of Life, and then the subtitle, How to Play It. This has become a great book of inspiration for people who go into this negative phase and who are inclined to say, what a pity, the world is bad, what shall we do? The economy is down, we're into another phase of life. See how the suffering people are there. Yes, people are suffering. But should we make that the formula? Should we make that the future design, the future plan? If we think like that, that would be our world. Does that mean we should lack compassion? No. That's part of the game. When people are suffering, naturally it moves the heart. But we also have to accompany it by, but there's a divine entity sitting within that, sitting within everything, and things will pass in a flash. Compared to, say, 13.8 billion years of this universe, so they say at the moment, what is a mere flash in the pan, a mere 20 years, a mere 30 years, a mere week? By putting in positive values, we can make a transformation. Thought is a powerful thing. We have nothing more powerful than it, but we can exercise it. Most people leave it alone, and most people then assume and absorb and buy into life is a battle, life is a struggle. Great enthusiasm comes when you change it. Then you play the game well, fearlessly, with a sense of divine purpose. That means you will always be energized completely by this. Knowing that the energy is not yours personally. It doesn't belong to you. Only one mind, only one energy, one purpose. Find it out, use it. Do it with great vigor. Make it your life obsession. Make it your magnificent endeavor. And so that is worth studying and worth absorbing, more importantly, worth practicing. And all of that came from somebody gave good wishes from Dungannon's library. I don't know what it has to do with Dungannon's library now, looking back on it, but anyway, there it is. See, this faculty of attention, we have to recognize that attention gets deviated naturally by itself when circumstances force us to engage our attention away from negativity. And the example that I often give is a married couple fighting, throwing things, shouting. All of a sudden, doorbell rings. You open the door, and there is an old school friend. And the fighting automatically ceases. You don't want to look bad. And this old school friend comes in. Please welcome. Come in, come in, come. Please take a seat. Would you like something to drink? Cup of tea? A slice of cake? And then for the next 2-3 hours, you talk about the old days you had, the old school days and old friends. What became of so-and-so? What became of so-and-so? Remember when we did this? Remember when we did that? Everybody's laughing and so on and so forth. After 2 hours, the guest goes, I don't know if the couple will resume their fight. Maybe. That's up to them. But one thing I know is that for 2 hours, they were able to put all that anger and negativity aside. Now, if we have the capacity to do that for 2 hours together, we can do it for 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, a day, a week, a year, a lifetime. We have the possibility of doing it. So it's worth training. Avoid negative company. Bhagavad Gita says, Katha Upanishads, eschew, spit out the company of those people who are basically negative. Negative means materialist. Now, materialists will deny that they are negative. But if you ask them where things come from, they say from nothing. If you ask them what the purpose of life is, there's no purpose. If you ask them if they're happy, they may say yes, they may say no, but it's all dependent on the circumstance. And there's no reason why they cannot be Epicurean. There's no reason why they cannot be hedonists, because they're not frightened of any consequences. They make sure that their behavior is only consequentialism. They only do something according to how it affects themselves. A kind of self-centered position that is utilitarian. If it benefits me, I'll do it. If it doesn't benefit me, I won't do it. Well, what kind of situation is that? That is all basically negative. The positive side is it is all glory. It is all radiance. We have a right to beam from a station that beams and spread the glory everywhere, making a transformation. Isn't that better? If we have the opportunity to engage in joy or sorrow, surely we'll choose joy. And the potential is sitting in every second. So there are two things we have. You can either choose to be a member of the human race, in which case you can get the opportunity for unlimited joy, infinite possibilities, or you can engage in the human race, which will only bring stress and difficulties and pain. It's up to you.
Yes, Swamiji, thank you very much. It's really, really good. But can this state of superconsciousness, can it become a natural sort of rhythm, like, or do we regress? Like, if we stop, do we just go back, like, to being, or is it easier for some people than others?
Like everything else, it requires repetition and practice, so it requires training. The training overall is called yoga, and the yogis will describe it as a kind of original channel, a luminous channel, and we can gather all our energy inwards and direct it up this new way that becomes a revealing way. But if we're not careful, of course, if we don't sustain it, then we can go back to basics. You see, there was one disciple of Ramakrishna, and after some time, when the master had passed away, some years passed, and Swami Brahmananda came across him, and he said, "This person seems to be a different person." And the person admitted, "Yes, you see, I engaged in bad behavior now. But you sat at the master's feet. Wasn't your life transformed by him?" It was. But then this came in and that came in. I forgot all about it. But thank you for reminding me. I had to renew it. So there's no holiday for this game. We have to be constantly alert. Don't forget, it is like walking on the edge of a razor. We have to be constantly vigilant, constantly alert. And so, but at some point, its own momentum takes over. Just like flowing down a river, creating a degree of momentum until the current takes you by itself. At that point, of course, it is beyond regression. It is beyond any looking back. So, but we have to start somewhere, and we have to constantly channel this energy into a revealing, in a revealing way, that is entering into this area of superconscious mind. All inspiration has come from it, by the way. I believe Beethoven, his music comes from it. All creative discoveries come from it. I believe E = MC² came from it. Special relativity came from it. Unusual insights came from it. But you see, these can come and these can go, and we need to engage in a constant cultivation all the time. And why should we do it? Because doing it makes us joyful. When we steer our energy, which is all irregular, full of ups and downs, pain and pleasure, both. When we say, let me systematically move our attention, move the mind in a systematic way, it sets up a rhythm. Swami Vivekananda in his Raja Yoga will compare it to electricity. What is electricity? Nobody knows, he says. But what we know is that when electrons are directed in a straight line, when they're sequentially directed, we get electrical power. Otherwise, it's just some energy of some kind scattered in every direction. Light, when it's scattered, is able to illumine many things. So far, so good. But if we take all those rays of light, if we take all those beams and gather them in one way and beam it in a certain direction, it can cut steel. It's a laser beam. So we have to make sure our concentration, our attention is used as a revealing, powerful laser beam. A laser beam of concentration. It's all about concentration. Yoga, by definition, is concentration. Good. All right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.